Moonlight is a film that has been garnering a hell of a lot of buzz, and it is up for Best Film. Do you think it deserves to be there?
Every shred of buzz is more than deserved. I mean, there are some films which come along which is kind of tower above the competition. There's so many great films which have been nominated for various, not just for Best Film, but across the categories. But Moonlight makes everything else seem quite old, and that's the thing I came away from the film with. It feels like there's a new voice in Barry Jenkins, the film's director, and it's a whole new way of approaching cinema. It does it in quite a subtle, discreet way. There's nothing that splashy about the movie, but somehow you feel like it's a breath of fresh air. This film.
It's a film that absolutely captured my heart, I have to say. It is delicate, and I'm delighted to see it kind of nominated in Best Film. It's a gorgeous, surprising story at every turn that takes place in 3 chapters. It's one of those films I almost don't want to talk about it, because the more innocent you are...
You want people to just see the movie.
It exists in Moonlight. It's almost like a will-o'-the-wisp. You wonder if you've actually experienced that movie. It stars our own Naomi Harris, who's been nominated for supporting actress for her turn. Very different to Miss Moneypenny. It's a complete different turn. But she only did 3 days on the movie, but she turned up and has delivered a powerhouse performance in it. But yet, despite hers and Mahershala Ali's powerhouse performance as another supporting turn, none of it dominates the overall kind of aspect of this movie.
I think that's absolutely right, and I think that's one of the things which feels so original and so fresh about it, is it doesn't belong to any one person. It feels like the work of a collective. It feels like an ensemble cast, and the director has worked with them very closely to produce something which is the experience of a huge number of people, and that's what gives it that sense of richness and that human experience. Because, yeah, I think some people will look at the movie and think, well, OK, so it's a movie for the LGBT community or for people of colour. Yes, it is that, and it's also a movie for straight people, people who, you know, whose sexuality is not an issue to them in any way. It's a movie for white people, for people of colour. It's a movie for everyone. It's a movie for movie audiences.
To pick up on that, so this is a movie I think we can say about homosexuality in the African American community, which we don't see very often on our screens. So it feels like quite a brave film, but I know Barry Jenkins was quite anxious about taking this on as a straight director.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's a sort of... Yeah, it is about homosexuality in the African-American community, slightly. I mean, it's a movie, Danny says, for anyone who's ever loved, anyone who ever grew up, anyone who ever had a mum, anyone who went to school. You don't have to have had a same-sex relationship to appreciate it. You have to have had a relationship, one that lingers on you, one that influences you. You have to have wanted to respond to bullies. You have to want to have grown up and changed. You want to find your way in the world. It's a kind of symphony of a movie, because even the music is tremendous in there. There's an Aretha Franklin track in there that kind of reverberates throughout. There's a Barbara Lewis track that happens at the key moment that is devastating. I mean, it slays me, the music.
The way the music's used is so inventive as well, because there's some old standards which come in there, and there's a genre, a kind of sub-genre of R&B called chopped and screwed, which is where everything sounds a little distorted and a little weird, and it kind of fits so beautifully with that kind of neon Miami. I've seen lots of movies set in Miami in the past. I've never seen it look quite like this, where it feels so real and yet so unreal, and so much like a movie at the same time. Everything feels like it just came together in a moment.
As you say, because this is a movie that sort of has everybody's stamp on it, do you think that's why Barry Jenkins has been overlooked in the directing category?
I think that's a really interesting explanation. And I hope it's true, because otherwise it doesn't make sense to me. You know, I mean, clearly there are a lot of good directors out there who've produced good work this year. I think Barry Jenkins is head and shoulders above any of them. Genuinely, he is a new voice, and he's doing something which is so bold. It's important, I think, that we recognise him, not because he's a person of colour and a director of colour, but because he's a fantastic director already, and he's going to be an even better one.
It feels to me like this is the film that pushes the envelope. This is the film that I mentioned with La La Land and Damien Chazelle, who's 31, Barry Jenkins is 37. Suddenly, it feels with these 2 films that Hollywood has kind of got a bit of swagger, a bit of cool back, a bit of youth, and it needs it. Because, you know, Hollywood is under threat from Netflix, from telly, from all these different YouTubers. And it feels like a sort of film that the new generation can come to and say, that's what cinema is. It has that kind of absolute eureka moment for me. It feels like it's come from another planet, yet is entirely recognisable as my own planet.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's a really important point, which is cinema has to sell itself to young people. We have to bring in new audiences, and La La Land does do it in a certain way, but Moonlight does it in a different way, which is, yes, if you're 15, 16, 17 years old, I think aesthetically, because of the use of the music, because it is human sympathetic, you know, and young people are kind of smarter than the older generation in that sense. You know, they do see much less colour, and they're much less hung up, I think, on sexuality. So they will see this. Teenagers will see this as a human story. I interviewed Barry Jenkins, and I mentioned the awards hubbub around the film, and he burst out laughing at the idea, because to get this film made was tough. I mean, it's made for no money, and it was made over a long period of time, and putting it together was a struggle. To get the film made was what they were working hard at. The idea that it's getting awards now never even entered their heads.
To illustrate how difficult this film was to get made, it was originally a play, which even as a play didn't get made. You know, this struggle to even kind of get through that kind of process. So for it to come to be an award, to be here at the BAFTAs at all, is an extraordinary achievement. And I think that's to do with the fact that once you see it, you're in love with it. I mean, it's a film about love, but it is actually a film to fall in love with. I felt the touch of the skin on this film, the atmosphere, the warmth of the sea, the moonlight, the water. The shots in it that remind you of Ernest Dickerson or, you know, Boys in the Hood, that kind of thing. And yet it's really kind of jumped on into the here and now.
It's really interesting. I mean, the filmmakers that he looks to, and you can see this coming through in the movie, are people like, it's Wong Kar-wai, it's his big inspiration. You know, and he's drawn from Southeast Asian cinema because he came from a background where, you know, he was a poor kid, you know, and his mother was involved with crack, so he wasn't one of these kind of wunderkind who turn up wanting to be a director. He was into his late teens, he found himself with a movie camera, and so he found the movies that inspired him came from very different places. He didn't necessarily sit there, as a lot of people do through film school, watching Spielberg, watching Scorsese, you know, there's like the canon. He came at it from a completely different place, and you can see that on screen. And again, I think that's why Moonlight feels like such a complete bolt out of the blue sky.
There has not been a film like Moonlight before, I think it's safe to say. So do you think that it does have a chance of winning a BAFTA?
You know what, I do think that there's La La Land and there's Moonlight and then there's everything else. That's my view. If people do get a bit grinchy about La La Land in this kind of long process, which it is between, you know, the nominations and then the BAFTAs here, as you say, on February the 12th, I think Moonlight's the one that people will fall in love with, that maybe people haven't seen that. That's the one they're going to discover.
Yeah.
And boy, are they in for a treat when they find that glittering treasure.
Yeah, it'd be nice if the time was right for Moonlight. I think there would be a poetic justice to that.
As Jason said, we will be finding out all the winners on February the 12th, so please join us then.